Hello, friends. So happy to have you here with us today at Radical Joy. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time with us, well, we're glad you're here. Each week, we're here with you talking about things that weigh on our minds and hearts, hoping if you're dealing with something similar, well, we can adjust our perspectives as you listen. The more people we meet and the more places we go, the more we realize how important it is to make people aware of the fact that there is no shame in enjoying the parts of our lives that are incredible. Now it's time for some radical joy, and this week the three fingers pointing back at us are for absences and opposites. I had a very interesting conversation today at the gym. I recorded a couple of episodes this morning, needed to go to the gym, get a couple of things kind of squared away, and then I always love going because it seems like I can always find some wonderful topic to talk about after I've done some physical exertion. Whether that it gets me in a good mindset for thinking, or you need that focus to sort of go deeper into what you think you already know on the surface, or maybe you just have an exchange with some people there at the gym that helps spur new ideas and thoughts. And that is what happened today. I'm at the gym and I'm talking with some friends, and they have a more conservative view on a lot of things in life and the world than I, which is fine. Actually, I encourage it, quite frankly. It's so nice to be able to speak to different kinds of people with different sorts of viewpoints and perspectives. Otherwise, you just kind of surround yourself with people who feel the same as you. And, well, basically, you're all patting each other on the back and not really doing much to help the situation. And we are in the middle of a situation, in case anybody was curious. But the more we started talking, the more we talked and the deeper we got into the conversation, it was more about who deserves to live in poverty. Now, that's not exactly where it started, of course. These guys are talking about how, well, if you don't do a good job and you don't show up and you don't work hard and you don't go above and beyond, that you didn't deserve to get paid as much as someone who did. I said, okay, great. I said, and I just want to know who among us deserves to live in poverty. And see, here's the thing. They started conversing in a way that sort of meant the same thing as who deserves to live in poverty, but they don't like to put it that way because, of course, nobody wants to say anyone deserves to live in poverty. Well, of course, no one's really ready to put a very pointed tip on anything. So what we do instead is just say that the world would be better if people were just more loving. So, well, that seems like a very commonsensical statement to make, that the world would be better if people were more loving. It's not, the worst problem we have is a people problem. And that's always a slippery slope because it's real easy to say that there are bad people in the world. It's like, okay, all right. I said, so if people were more loving, what is it that they are now that needs more love? Meaning, what is the opposite? What is the other side of that coin that you said love would be able to fix? So it's not hate. It's not a question of hate. Now, my dad used to have a saying. He said that the opposite of love is indifference. Hate is just, it's the same emotion. It's just maybe this is not my dad's phrase now moving forward. It's just a couple of cocktails away from a makeout or better. Hate and love share a very thin wall in that duplex. You know what I'm saying? Right. So if the opposite of love is indifference, and well, my thought was this. I said, in this specific instance, especially, I don't think the opposite of love is indifference. I think indifference plays a part in it. I think we're talking about the ills of the world and why we're continually stuck in the mire of our own obstacle is that we deal too much with what, in this case, I see to be the opposite of love as greed. Greed is the driving force that keeps everything the way it is instead of all of us moving forward. We had some wonderful conversations about how it doesn't make any sense that we continue to hold our country's government to a standard that was set 250 years ago. I was like, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly because they were talking about the First Amendment and is it okay to say death to America? I said, yeah, First Amendment freedom says that you get to say whatever you like. Like, well, I don't believe that. I said, that's fine. I said, and I do. And we continued to go back and forth. And then they brought up the fact was like, there's no way that the founding fathers could have known what we would deal with in the year 2024. I said, well, now you got to be careful. I was said, because if we're going to start to criticize the way the country is run because the forefathers didn't know what it would be like so many years in the future, we need to take a look at the Second Amendment as well. Matter of fact, we need to look at the whole document. Now, see, they didn't love this at all. And that's the part that always cracks me up. I'm just like, if you want to apply that to one, just to make sure that your opinions are upheld, that your bias is confirmed, you're going to have to make sure that that applies to all, which is where we get into the situation. It's like, okay, well, great. I think that a lot of the ills that we face as modern society now, whether it's in the United States or anywhere in the world, is the fact that love meets the adversary, greed. And often people don't see those as opposing forces. And I think that's where a lot of this comes into play. No one, and this is my opinion wholeheartedly, and I will say it with my whole chest. No one deserves to be hungry. No one deserves to live in subadequate housing. I see those as just genuinely human right type situations. That's just how I see it. Now, anyone who works 40 hours a week, for whatever reason, we're going to throw that arbitrary number out there. If you donate 40 hours of your life per week to a job, that job should pay you enough in whatever economy you're living in so that you can meet all of your basic needs. I'm not saying luxury. No one here is saying that. There is definitely a hierarchy, a pecking order. I do not believe that any person working any job should have to worry about food or healthcare or housing. Now, there's a lot of words a lot of people can go ahead and start flinging at this point, and I'm like, delicious. Please, by all means, because your words do not harm me. What I would love to do is for you to justify why anyone working 40 hours per week don't deserve those things, because that qualifies to me as lack, as poverty, hunger. And if this is the greatest nation in the world and we're living on and living in some of the most advanced times as far as society has seen, known to the human condition, why, oh, why is anyone in this day and age hungry? Why are they housing insecure? Why are they health insecure? Right? And the best answer I can come for something like that is going to be greed, which is what I see as the opposite of love in this specific case. The love of money is greater than the love of your fellow human being. And that hurts me. It breaks my heart if we're really going to get very, very descriptive about it. We continued down this path. We continued this conversation, and I turned to one of the guys. I said, okay, you work with a lot of very affluent people that make a lot of money. I said, have you encountered someone who is wealthy, capital W? Someone who has so much money, they're sort of lost contact or connection with the rest of the human condition. And he looked at me and blinked a couple of times. He's like, I'm not exactly sure. I said, exactly. Have you worked or dealt with anyone who doesn't know the price of a gallon of milk, who doesn't know the price of a dozen eggs? And he looked at me again, and he didn't really understand that there were people out there that do that sort of thing. And if you are so far disconnected from the life of normal people that you don't know how much it costs for a gallon of milk or a dozen eggs, chances are very good that you don't know that whenever people say that they are in crisis, that you can take it as seriously as perhaps you should be, especially if you're one with the means to help people get out of that crisis through. I'm not saying charity. I'm saying this just, if you're a business owner, if you're someone who runs the wheels of industry, perhaps you should look at why that is. To change gears ever so slightly, we've talked about opposite in that little anecdotal example. Now I would love to move on to something that is more of an absence. Something I love to say about myself is that the older I get, the less stupid I become. Now, that's not nice to say to somebody else, but I don't really care too much whenever I talk about myself. It doesn't bother me whenever I say that. When one educates oneself, when one receives new information and is able to integrate it into their perspective, into their viewpoint, into their worldview, that's what I would call the death of the stupidity in regards to that one specific topic or item or mindset. Wonderful. Now, here's the thing. Stupidity or ignorance, however you want to put it, if that makes you feel more comfortable, can't just die. It can't just leave, disappear. It leaves in its wake a void, an absence, if you will, a vacuum. So whenever I think about educating myself to become less ignorant, it's not that that dwindles in size. It leaves a void that must be filled. Because for whatever reason, I feel as though normal physics apply to this, though the media may be different. Okay. So if you were to burn a candle inside a bottle, for example, and you say the bottle is turned upside down in a pan of water, as the air is burned from the bottle, the water will siphon up into the bottle. The water takes the void left behind by the air because it's been consumed by the candle. I want to say this is very similar with ignorance and or stupidity. Thing is, we have to be very careful what it is we're going to use to fill that void once the ignorance is educated and the stupidity is eradicated. We have to be ready to fill that with a medium of wisdom, of intellect, of knowing better, of maturity. There are so many things that could take the place of that thing that was taking the space earlier and is now, thank goodness, to education or to knowing better or to having friends that are just caring enough to make sure that they very gently ease you into the next mode of your evolution and growth. We have to be ever so mindful to make sure that whatever takes that place is not more ignorance or a differing yet erring opinion or idea. Instead, we want to make sure we surround ourselves with people who know better, who are more experienced, more wise, more knowledgeable, so that once they educate that ignorance or that stupidity, that the void left behind is filled with wisdom, intelligence, experience. The absence of stupidity, the void left behind by the eradication of ignorance, we have to be ready to fill that with something that is better, that is smarter, that makes us both better and smarter. And I think that's such an interesting way of looking at it. I don't just learn better. Something was burned away, left a void, and I had to fill it with something. And I love the way that feels. I love the idea of it. I love the picture that it draws in my mind's eye. That this was not serving. I had outgrown this. I was still trying to apply this in a world where it is no longer applicable. And doing so made me appear to others that were smarter or better educated or farther along in their evolutionary process as someone who is naive. Or perhaps a different word. And because they helped me to learn, they helped me become more wise, to cultivate that intellect that I was given and want to use to its very greatest advantage. Now I have that option because we have cast off the chaff and now we're ready to consume the wheat. And it's lovely. I love that idea. I also love thinking that not every idea has an opposite. It has parallel and or intersecting thoughts a lot of times as well. Like black, whenever you think of that term, what is the opposite of black? White, okay? But you also have so many differing levels of gray that are so close to black, it's very difficult to distinguish. And also off-white and ecru and all of these things that are almost white, but without a point of comparison for pure white, are not quite there. And I just love thinking about these kinds of things. I don't know. It feels very abstract today. I don't have a ton of examples to prove these things. I've got some anecdotes to tell that tell you why it is that I'm thinking about this and bringing it to us today, bringing it to our attention. I just want to make sure that we realize that whenever we get rid of one thing, it can often leave a vacuum, and we must be super vigilant to make sure that we fill that with something that is going to be more useful, something that is going to be proven to be closer to accurate, precise, right? And I love that idea. I love thinking that whenever we eradicate one thing, and it's not just that we have burned it off, but we have perhaps um, excised it. We've used a very sharp blade of maybe, iron sharpens iron. So maybe you have a teacher, a mentor, someone whom you trust, in whom you trust, where you bring this to them, you discuss it. They start to whittle away at the former ideas and they start to use that ever so sharp blade of knowledge and care for you as their mentee, as their protege, to make sure that whenever those ideas have been loosened, because they can't remove them, they can't really convince you to believe something else. What they can do is put it in front of you, and they can make it as an appetizing and appealing a dish as possible. However, they cannot shove the fork into your hand and force you to eat what they've put in front of you. Ultimately, that is our goal. We choose, we make choices to be smarter, to be better, to be less ignorant, to be less stupid. And we replace those things with wisdom, evolution, grace, love, charity, those kinds of things. It never ceases to amaze me whenever we talk about doing things for the welfare of everyone else, like taxes. We pay into a common pot, we pay into a common account, and then for those of us that are more at risk for things like housing insecurity, food insecurity, those kind of things, they can rely on us as a people and the resources that we have pooled in order to continue to live and do well. And it's always so interesting to me to hear those first people pipe up like, well, are we supposed to just feed everyone? Um, no, I don't think that's really where we are. I think we've gone from 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. And instead, we've got to travel through 4 and 8 and 11 and 17 to get to 60. And it never ceases to amaze me that for some folks and groups of people, that is the first thing they want to ask. Well, is it my responsibility to make sure everybody has this? Well, great question. I know I have an answer. I honestly think that most people want to make their contribution to society based on what it is they have to offer, what their passions are, what their skill set offers to the community as a whole. And the first thing so many people want to do in order to prove a point or in order to quote unquote win an argument or any number of things is always go for the very worst beliefs in the way people are assumed to act. It hurts. It's just like, why do you want to jump to that? Why is that your default? And honestly, whenever I look at all the things that our money could be going to, we have foreign aid, we have a ridiculous amount of money going toward the military and things like that in order to keep people safe, in order to make sure that our interests are safeguarded. I understand. I'm not naive. I get exactly what's going on. And to a point, yes, we do need that contribution and we do need that resource placed in certain strategic areas around the world. I understand that. I also understand that a country that wants to call itself great takes care of its least. And I make no apologies for it. I said what I said. It's so funny to me. Like, well, what if this person is just so lazy and they come to you and you've busted your ass all day and they say they're hungry? I was like, great. We load up and we go eat something. And they just look at me. I was like, what? It's breaking bread. I'm not taking them to a steakhouse. can barely afford going to one of those by myself. I'm certainly not going to go and take a stranger. But if they think I can't take them to Raising Cane's where we can split a couple of chicken tendies and a really good pot of sauce or three, absolutely, I can do that. Well, then you've made them dependent on you. No, then I fed somebody. That's all I've done. And you continue to want to go 17 steps into the future instead of just looking at what you've done and what one person can do. And it breaks my heart that that's where people want to start thinking. And to me, that is an absence of empathy. And in one way, it is an opposite of love. That instead of just wanting to do good for one person in need one time, you want to jump to see how that's going to affect them 5 years into the future. And all of a sudden they're some, I don't know, welfare dependent, blah, blah, blah. It's there for a reason. And I know that there are times I've used it. I consider myself to be a relatively hard worker. I've used it because whenever you're between jobs, you've paid into it. You've done the things. You've set aside those funds. It's not like it's an option. And now whenever I'm between jobs and looking for something more stable, more lucrative, I can call upon that system to help me while I look for something new. I think it is hilarious and short-sighted when people think that people are living some sort of like royal life on government assistance. How much money do you think these people are making? Okay. And there were days I would apologize for getting political, and this is not one of those days. This has a very specific purpose. I am criticizing the system in which we live. I'm also sending out a lifeline to the people who feel similarly to this and asking them to be more on the side of generosity and love than on the side of greed and what would we call that? Whenever your first assumption is that your fellow human being only wants to work the system instead of being a contributing member of society. Now, I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I understand that. Again, not naive, not born yesterday, clearly. What I'm saying is that there are people out there who need our help. And whenever we join together in the thousands and the millions, it's really so simple and so unbelievably cheap. It just boggles the mind, especially for as much money as most of us pay in taxes. Pennies. Just to make sure people who are trying to get back on their feet, people who are trying so, so hard. It's difficult out there, okay? If you haven't experienced it, congratulations. My heart and my applause go to you. I'm so happy to know that you didn't have to deal with hardship or difficulty or working 40 hours a week and still having to sweat bullets because you're living paycheck to paycheck. And sometimes the paycheck doesn't even cover everything you need. Sometimes there's still rent left over. Sometimes there's still mortgage expecting to be paid. Sometimes folks have to make that soup stretch a little more with a little bit of tap water or whatever bullion you've got in the cabinet, you know? Times are scary for some folks. There is a very large change coming. If you don't see it, I would love to invite you to think about that the next time you see a lot of these things happening. We have an election coming up. We have a ton of things happening in the Supreme Court. The Congress of the United States of America is absolutely useless unless it comes down to something that helps either folks that have more money than they know what to do with or, basically the same thing with corporations. Cracks me up that the biggest thing that we can get done in absolute record time in years of this session in Congress is a TikTok ban. Are you kidding me right now? Folks are hungry. Corporations reporting record profits. Inflation is out of control. Rent's going up. These kinds of things. Wages are stagnant. I'm like, okay. We've heard so much about it. We feel almost desensitized to it. It's an absence of empathy because we've heard so much about it. And just because it doesn't lay itself down at our door, we just think that maybe that's not the truth. I'm here to tell you, friends, it's true. It's gospel. And it is the very hard truth for a lot of people. Just because it doesn't come knocking at your door 24/7 in the dead of the night, waking you from a sound sleep in a cold sweat and a shrunken scrotum, this does not mean it's not true. Okay? It just means you have been fortunate enough so far that it doesn't affect you as drastically as it does others. It's empathy, it's love. It is the absence of self. It is the absence of greed. It is willingness to look at the lives of others, to know that we have a responsibility as humanity to watch over the most vulnerable of our populations, to make sure that everyone, at very least, has enough to eat, a safe, warm, dry place to sleep. And when I say things like that, if your first reaction is, well, why do they deserve it and I don't? What in any of anything have I said today that makes you think that I feel that way? That's a big jump. And for whatever reason, a lot of folks I've been seeing and talking to one on one, person to person, not hearsay, not things you see on the internet, some vague ridiculous, but actual people and conversations. That's a big jump to make. That's not what I'm saying. That's not at all what I'm saying. Now, I will be the first to stand up and say if you contribute 40 hours of your life a week to the job, to the boss man or boss lady, you should be able to eat. You should be able to live indoors, creature comforts, a way of getting around reliably, gas money, insurance money. Prices keep going up, and we just keep expecting folks to take it. It was like, how? Without a commensurate rate rise in wage, how in the world are folks supposed to afford this? They were living tight before. And I just want folks to continue to think about opposites and absences. And when those things are burned away, when they shrink and decay and leave that void, that hole, that vacuum that must be filled. Just the physics of the situation say they must be filled. Step up. Be the one to make sure that you are looking for the intelligent, caring answer to make sure that that fills the vessel, okay? We continue to educate ourselves. We read, we consume media. Okay. And I know that's not always the same thing. And you can get good information and bad information from literally everywhere and anywhere in the world. I please, please, please continue to ask questions. When you read something that confirms something that you've already figured was right or true or good, please continue to look for it. Hey, I'm talking to me too. I'm talking to me too. Just so we are abundantly clear, I am notorious for seeing a headline or seeing a blurb or a soundbite or one of these kind of things, and I just go off on a tear. I hollered at some stranger on the internet yesterday or a few days ago. He was on Facebook talking about, when if you get your news from Facebook and da 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 da. I was like, let me just stop you right there, right there. Facebook is not a news source, okay? And you may be listening to this on Facebook right now. I honestly don't know where you're listening, and that's okay. It is a starting point. It is literally designed to get you involved and engaged. If you find something there that really gets you going, wonderful. What that is literally square one. From there forward, what it is your job to do as a kind, thinking, evolved, forward moving human being is continue the homework from there. You've got the topic, super. Now you've got the Google. Now you've got the Bing, the Yahoo. You got all these things, all these resources literally at your fingertips to make sure that you can do more of your own study so you can form a more well-informed opinion on this probably very sensational, radical idea on social media. In itself, it is not a news outlet. When paired with the wealth of human knowledge accessible literally in fingertips and seconds right in front of you, it is a very big help. So please, Before we get upset about something, before we go flying off the handle about one of these things, you're making terrible assumptions about the people that we're supposed to love and care for as a community, as a society. Think about where that's coming from. If what you're saying seems unkind or judgmental, perhaps a little vindictive, or feels just a little bit ill-informed whenever you really stop to think about where you heard it, what that source was, etc. Great. Let's flip that on its head right quick. Let's try to figure out something else. Because I don't know, it's not even an opposite or an absence, because I think those two things are also very absolute. What I can do is ask you to set it on a different trajectory. If for whatever reason causing its absence or finding its opposite seems just a little bit insurmountable, at least try to knock it off its course. Can we do that? I would love to ask that of you. Little abstract today, kids. I'm not going to lie. It was just one of those things, but I love the idea of this. I think it's so important that we don't try to sway anyone or convince anyone, because many times people are not convincible, especially on topics like this. What I do hope you will do is try to find the opposite side of the coin and present that. Well, I hear what you're saying. And also, if that is applicable, what if this? And once that way of thinking is removed, what takes its place? I think an acknowledgement is crucial. I think an acknowledgement of merit in what someone is saying is also very important. And I think that making sure to provide something that runs alongside, that is not perhaps conflicting, yet a parallel or very different way of thinking without being a complete polar opposite, is going to be a huge help. I think I made more progress today speaking with someone in that vein than I did by saying something opposite, or no to their yes, or yuck to their yum. It's not about swaying someone. It's about making sure that they continue to stay open to new ideas, because eventually those new ideas push out the old ones that are obsolete or hateful, bigoted, etc., if they're truly looking to make the change. I love the time we get to spend together. Thank you so much. If this is your first episode of Radical Joy, welcome. You have definitely picked a charged day to join us for your first time. If this is not your first episode, welcome back. Thank you so much for being with us here today. It's always such a joy to have you here with us, to know that you think so much of the podcast or of me or of CLW, that you come to be with us in half-hour increments. If you're the review type person, I hope that you will go to your platform where you're listening and give us a 5-star review. Once you do that, please make sure to take a screenshot, send that to us so that we can send you a sticker. It is hot pink and it is perfect for a journal, a water bottle, a computer, a windshield, wherever you like to stick them, stick it. As always, we're so happy to have you and the time that you spend with us here at Radical Joy. And please always remember, we love y'all. The bottom line is, use your words, friends. Thank you for joining us again in this moment of radical joy. If this is your first time, we're so happy you're here. Take a moment to check out our archive. See if there's something else that fires you up, rekindles the joy in you. And hey, spread the word if you enjoyed it. We welcome reviews and messages. Let me know what you want to talk about. I rarely run out of things to say. So if there's something on your mind or heart, I want to hear from you. Don't forget, there is no shame in joy. I am not a therapist or a medical professional. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please call 911. This content and other content produced by CLW Studios and affiliated partners is not therapy, and nothing in this content indicates a therapeutic relationship. Any opinions of guests on this podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of James or CLW Studios. Please consult with your therapist or seek one in your area if you're experiencing mental health symptoms. Anything in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Learn more about James and CLW Studios. Follow the link in the show notes. Don't forget to leave a review, and hey, we'll send you a sticker. Just send a screenshot and let us know where you want it sent. Have a great week of radical joy. Love y'all.